Hello, welcome to Alette's webinar, Publishers' Hidden Content, How PyJ Can Help. I'm Shelley Omgren, a member of Alette's Continuing Resources Committee on Holdings Information. I will be your host for today's webinar. Our presenters today are Steve Shadle and Regina Romano Reynolds. Steve is the Serials Access Librarian at the University of Washington Libraries, where he manages the library linking systems that provide access to journal full text. In addition, he catalogs e-serials. Steve's background in serial standards began with his work as an ISSN cataloger at the Library of Congress and currently includes serving on the NISO Standing Committee for Presentation and Identification of Electronic Journals, PyJ. Regina is the director of the United States ISSN Center and head of the ISSN section at the Library of Congress. She was a member of the U.S. RDA Test Coordinating Committee and has extensive experience in standards for serials, including the ISSN standard and NISO PyJ. There are a few things to keep in mind for today's presentation. All attendees are muted. If you have questions for Steve and Regina, please type them into the question box on your screen and they will answer them at the end of the presentation. Our software does not have interactive chat capabilities. You may use the Alette's hashtag if you wish to use Twitter to comment on today's presentation. The hashtag is ALCTSCE. We do not monitor the Twitter feed, so please use the question box to submit questions and comments. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive an email with links to the recording and presentation slides. And now, here is Regina. There will be a slight delay as we change presenters.
Hi everyone. Steve and I are here today to tell a story. It's a story about content lost and content found again. We are here to provide an overview of PyJ, the recommended practices for the presentation and identification of e-journals. We are also here to give some examples of how it's being used to provide better access to articles, as well as better identification and description. Of course, the story is ongoing, just like serials. PyJ best practices. Oh, and here we are, and I'm sure you won't have any trouble figuring out who's who. So, PyJ best practices are really to help everyone get at what Peter Burnhill, the former directory of the UK Keepers Registry, has called the object of desire, namely the article. These best practices are recommendations primarily directed at content providers. That is publishers, platform providers, aggregators, and the like. But really the goal is to help librarians and end users. And often it ends up being to help librarians help end users all attain this article of desire, what they need for their research. And it starts with the citation. So frequently, students and researchers are going to look for an article that they see cited in a book or another article. And they will very frequently be looking in a database. The problem occurs when the search fails. Why does the search fail? Because the database does not list the title under which the article was cited, because it was a former title. So everyone loses when that article is not located. The researcher, the library, the distributor, the aggregator, the publisher, and the author. They all lose. Lost time, lost sales, lost credibility all around. So PyJ is coming to the rescue by providing guidance to content providers, especially about former titles. just because a title has changed, just because the current title is now different, does not mean that there are not still citations out there from the time the journal had a different title. You really cannot rewrite history. It's one of the take-home messages of PIJ. Now you might think this is pie in the sky. How are we ever going to communicate to all those publishers, vendors, and people wedded to their web page presentations how to do things differently? Well, one piece of very positive news is that since PIJ was first published in 2013, the full PIJ document of 67 pages has been downloaded over 11,000 times. Somebody's paying attention. So here's a look at the cover page, and it is called a recommended practice. It is not a standard, a formal standard, because formal standards take a lot longer to develop, although I do have to say this one took over 2 years. Nonetheless, a formal ISO standard might take even more, 3+. It also can be more readily updated, whereas ISO standards have to go through a very long, arduous update process, something the ISSN is embarking on shortly. But I can also say and explain towards the end of my part of this presentation that the recommendations in PIJ for e-journals are right now being incorporated into an existing ISO standard, ISO 8, which is on the presentation of periodicals and somehow never got updated since 1977, so it has almost nothing about ISSN and nothing about e-journals. So let's get back to looking at the table of contents for PIJ. You can see that in Section 2, the recommended practices only take up 3 pages. We on the working group to develop these best practices wanted them to be simple, short, clear, and really focus on the most important recommendations. But at the same time, there are 32 examples taken from real pages at the time, real publications on the web, because we knew that one possible result of our recommendations would be a little bit of, well, nobody could do that. How could anybody follow these practices? And so we really have 32 examples of, yes, this is how it could be done. We also have 5 very useful appendices, the first being the examples, but one on how to find out title history and ISSN, existing ISSN. 1, Appendix C, all you would ever want to know about ISSN. D for cost stuff and DOI. And E gives related standards and recommended practices and a bibliography. So I want to briefly go over those simple and short key recommendations. The most important one of all, the one that really prompted the whole PIJ set of recommendations, has to do with presenting all content under its original title. As I mentioned before, you really cannot rewrite history, even in the digital era. Print publications are being scanned and digitized. Their titles don't really go away. Even more, citations to those articles that are at the bottom of other articles, contemporary with that publication, they cannot be erased and reformatted to use the current title of the journal. So the original titles have to be indexed, have to be presented. have to be available for those searching from the original citations. Now, and also another strong recommendation is to include title histories. And we have many examples in the appendices showing what we mean by that. Really, sometimes just a simple list of all the various titles and the time periods that they cover. Of course, since I was on the committee, but really because ISSN is so important, we definitely have a recommendation to include accurate and complete ISSN information. And one of the appendices tells how to find good, accurate ISSN information. We recommend including numbering and the same scheme for all formats. Somehow it seems tempting to have a volume and numbering scheme on the print and just maybe have dates for the online. But it's really helpful when these line up appropriately. And then we recommend other identifying information. So now let's look a little more deeply into the recommended practices. Take a closer look. Yes, they're simple, but just like this web, there is some complexity because after all, we are dealing with the complex beast that serials are. So what we want to make sure again and again is do include former titles. Present the content anywhere it is on that web page using the title and identifying citations under which it was originally published. And you will notice the slide says do in big letters. We deliberately crafted the recommended practices all in the positive, all but one. So most of them say do, and do, except for one time we just had to be really strong and say don't put all content from a former title under the current title. This was, if no other take-home got out, this was an important one. So we put it both in the positive and in the negative. Don't do this, as many are so tempted to do. Just say, oh, well, we can start fresh. We can just digitize all that back content, keep it simple for the user, and use the current title. Don't. Ah, yes, title changes bring a lot of weeping, wailing, wringing of hands, and sometimes even screaming. But there are ways to deal with them in the e-journal environment that try to take away some of the tears. So, ensuring that a change to an existing title is based on something real and purposeful, not just cosmetic change, not just to introduce a new buzzword, but maybe one that's not even in use in that particular profession. And we also give a little bit of a warning because capricious and unnecessary title changes can cause a library to re-examine whether they need that publication or not. It will show up in a database or on a list of highlights as new, and the library might examine their new titles, or they'll get a notice in the mail. So publishers and vendors and digitizers, don't call attention to a new title just to make it new, because you might end up losing some branding, causing some confusion, and in your worst case, losing a subscriber. So as far as what you should do consult an appropriate ISSN center, because many title changes may require a new ISSN. Now, one of the causes for tears, weeping, and wailing is that the library rules for when a title change requires a new description, a new record, a new ISSN, are rather complicated and sometimes even seem, dare I say, illogical. But we really don't expect the publisher to decide for themselves. Just consult us, send in an application with the new title, give us the old title, old ISSN, and we can wring our own hands, scratch our heads, consult our colleagues. We often will post on Concert List, "Dear Collective Wisdom, do you think this needs a new record, new ISSN, or not?" And when it is decided that yes, this is a new ISSN, a new title change, we recommend implementing at the start of a volume or a year. Now, title histories. That's those lists of the title sequences over time, the associated dates. And this is a wonderful thing to provide on the web page, especially if you've really lumped a lot of the content together in one numerical sequence. You can at least provide this title history. You can index the former titles. You can make these former titles searchable. Include the journal title, the date range, the ISSN for at least the current title and the immediately preceding or succeeding title as appropriate. Even better, give the full range of titles over time. And we give a little plug for the benefit of librarians in helping to discover these title histories. Unfortunately, the way our catalogs are now arranged, and I like to hope that the linked data feature will make this easier, librarians may have to pace through record after record following the chain of continued, continued, continued to help piece that title history together, but it's doable. OCLC still has their XISSN service that can also piece together title histories, although forgive me, OCLC and OCLC fans, I am too, but we cannot completely be sure that all the ISSN in WorldCat are 100% accurate. Just a little caveat. Okay, so let's look at an example of PyJ title histories and other elements that we're recommending. So first of all, the title is clearly presented, and this is one of those cases where the change from Journal of the American Planning Association to this very big, prominent JAPA is nonetheless minor, and the full expanded form is indeed still the title. The ISSN for both the print and the online are shown with the appropriate parenthetical qualifiers. And here's our title history at the bottom, where currently known as Journal of the American Planning Association, 1979 to the current, and then former title and its dates. Frequency is also a nice little bonus piece of information. Now, this Journal of Mechanical Design also has very clearly presented information. We've got our ISSN, our EISSN, and CODEN, which, if anyone hasn't encountered this before, it is a mnemonic code, alpha with an occasional letter thrown in, that actually preceded the ISSN. And forgive me, CODEN, I would have thought you'd gone away by now. It's, after all, 40-plus years since we've had ISSN, but it's still used a lot in the chemical industry. Chemical Abstracts issues it. And here we do have another nicely presented title history. And again, we wanted to show, when we put these PyJ examples together, yes, people do present title histories. It is possible to learn them and present them. And finally, an engineering journal with a very nice clear title history over here on the side. Again, started in 94, goes through a change in 98, goes through, excuse me, this is going in the opposite direction. All right, started in 80 and you have to work your way upwards, but giving that sequence of titles. And again, we recommend that they also be indexed and placed everywhere that the content is placed. So, back to the recommendations, where we're saying that you should keep the title consistent across your formats. When the online versions first came out, we would have Journal of Library Science. That was the print title. And then the clever people that put it on the web called it Journal of Library Science Online, thus making it more difficult for those libraries who were making a one-record policy, thus making it difficult to know, are these really the same content or are they two different publications? So the recommendation is keep it the same wherever, whatever the format. The numbering, again, I mentioned earlier, whether it's online, whether it's on print, one way or another, you need a designation. In a citation, some designation is going to be important, and a year often tells us the currency of the information. Keep it simple, and again, parallel across all the formats. And of course we have ISSN recommendations. So each title over time needs a separate ISSN. Major change of title always equals new ISSN. And each format, print, online, CD, needs a separate ISSN. With the upcoming revision of the standard, there is some talk of even more granularity. So the HTML, the PDF, the EPUB version might all at least be discussed in the working group as getting separate ISSN. Anytime I mention that, I get a lot of frowns in an audience. I get sometimes even gasps. And I get the statement that there's already too many ISSN. We have PISSN and EISSN and ISSN-L, and now we need more. So this will be a topic to come under discussion. But for now, at least, the print and online do need separate ISSN. The needed ISSN should be applied to by the appropriate ISSN center, and we do give an appendix where a publisher can look up how to find the ISSN International Center website to learn which center they should apply to. This recommendation to display all appropriate ISSN on each format is an answer to a question that we often get in the US ISSN Center. Well, how do I make my PDF when the same PDF file is really going to be used to publish the print, to output both the print and the online website? Well, put both on both. That way you only need one file and any user can recognize, oh yeah, this is where I get the print, this is where I get the online. So we say just display everything on everything. And there's a lot more good information in the ISSN appendix. This is the Appendix B, and I give lots of credit to my buddy Steve over there in the other Washington. This gives very thorough information about how to use the ISSN portal to get accurate ISSN, how to use other resources, really how to find good ISSN, good title histories. And this is in addition to just an ISSN appendix about how to use ISSN. So I'm coming to the part that I told you about on how PyJ information might ultimately, in fact will ultimately end up being part of an international standard. And that is this related standard ISO 8, which really has been out of use for many years because it's exclusive to print, has been up until this revision group is working on it, doesn't have hardly anything about ISSN. The ISSN standard was first published in 1975, and the standard ISO 8 only dates from 1977 when ISSN was still extremely in its infancy. So updating it to add information about how to deal with presentation issues in e-journals, really taking a lot of the good information from PyJ, as well as adding ISSN information and updating anything that needs to be updated about print presentation. Although print is diminishing, I keep reading that print is not dead yet. Print is still going to be around for a surprisingly long time, I believe. Survey after survey shows that students prefer reading print. I think journals, scholarly journals, probably will increasingly be online only, but there will still be print magazines and other print publications. So ISO 8 will cover format and arrangement of periodicals, whether in print or online, and will help to provide good guidance. So it's currently being updated by this working group of ISO. I believe from the most recent information that the chair, Lori Kaplan, said, Lori Kaplan of ProQuest, people can be added to an ISO working group even when the working group has started. If you are really interested, super interested in being on the ISO 8 working group, I'd suggest you contact NISO, and they will be able to give you better information about how that can be done. And just a little plug for the ISO working group that we expect to put together for the revision of the ISSN standard itself. That too, if you are in an organization that belongs to NISO, should be handled through NISO. And now I'm going to turn it over to Steve to give you some real-life examples of how PyJ has been used and can be used to provide updated and accurate linking information. Over to Steve.
Thank you, Regina. One of the elements of the guidelines deals with the syndication of e-journal data, specifically holdings and coverage data. And what I mean by syndication is when publishers and content providers distribute that metadata to various services, knowledge-based services, link resolvers, integrated library systems. So one of the things that I'm going to focus on today is providing a real-life example of how the hidden title change directly affects user access. So our library discovery environment here at the University of Washington, we work with Ex Libris systems. We have ALMA, which is our back-end ILS that includes both the electronic resource management system and our knowledge base. We use Primo as our front-end discovery system, and we use Primo Central as the source for all of the citations that populate our discovery system, that populate Primo. Here at the University of Washington, in Primo Central we have just under 400 collections profiled, which result in around, it's real difficult to do a count in Primo, but probably around 400 million citations. Most of those citations are for journal articles, but depending on the collections that we have profiled in Primo Central, it can include ebooks, ebook chapters, it can include streaming media, it can include conference proceedings, but the vast majority of it is for journal articles, citations for journal articles. And the other piece of this is that ALMA does include an open URL link resolver that's incorporated into the Primo display. So we are using open URL as rather than direct linking for most of the full text article linking that we are services that we are providing. So this is an example of some search results from our Primo instance. One of the things when I'm having to do troubleshooting, and that's part of my job, is having to troubleshoot linking failures. When I'm troubleshooting links associated with a particular journal, one of the easy ways for me to pull up all of the article citations from that journal is to just search on the ISSN in the discovery system. And as you can see, for this particular ISSN, which is for the journal Travel Behavior and Society, there are 31 articles that we have in our discovery system for that journal. So the way full text access works is the user will find an article that they're interested in. They click on the online access button or link, and then that results in a drop-down. And then within the drop-down that's labeled online access, you get a link, you're served a link to the full text of the article. Okay. This is basic Open URL Link Resolution 101. This is the way that this works basically is that the citation is matched against our knowledge base that's basically a database of ISSN and coverage dates. If it looks like we have the article, then the link resolver will figure out the actual full text link that needs to be created and will display it within the interface. So looking behind the scenes here, what we have in Alma, this is a screenshot from one of our back-end ILS Alma displays, is we see this is the record for this journal title. We see, and you can see the ISSN is the same, so this is the correct journal title. You can see that the coverage dates begin from 2014, from volume 1, number 1, to present. So that's our coverage, is 2014 to present. Excuse me. And because the citation is from May 2014, there's a match, and then therefore the link is created. So one of the fails that we have that happens occasionally is when there's a title change that happens with a change of ISSN. So if we have this publication here has gone through 2 changes that we have records of. From 1993 to 2002, it was published under the title Joint Commission Journal on Quality Improvement, and this ISSN was assigned 10703.241. And then from 2003 to 2004, it was published with a slightly different title, which was assigned a new ISSN. Now, when you look at the title, the scope of the title has changed from quality improvement to quality and safety. And then in 2005, the title changed again to being a journal about quality and patient safety. And again, a new ISSN was assigned. So if I was troubleshooting in this particular case, I had a report of some links not being generated when we knew that we had the full text. So what I did was I took the ISSN from the citation that was reported to me. I plugged that ISSN into our search system, discovered that there were 630 articles that appear in our discovery service that have that ISSN being cited in those articles, but none of the citations are showing that available online or access options link. You're not getting any online access, even though we actually do subscribe to the full text. Instead, when the user clicks on one of the availability and request options, that's basically representing our print holdings. So instead of getting an access online, instead of getting a full text link to the article, the user gets to see, gets information about our print holdings. And then basically a button that says, if you'd like us, we'll scan the article for you. It'll take us about a day or two to do that. So why are we not getting the full text links within these citations in our discovery system? The reason why is because for the record we have for this title that has been provided by the publisher to Ex Libris, which Ex Libris then uses to populate the knowledge base, that title is only the current title, the Journal on Quality and Patient Safety title, which began in 2005, but if you look at the coverage information, you see that the coverage information begins with 2000. So this is a case where the publisher or the content provider, in this case actually Ingenta, I'm happy to call people out when they deserve to be called out. Ingenta is providing only the current title, but they are providing a holding statement that incorporates the earlier titles. Because this ISSN that was associated with the journal when the article was originally published is not in our knowledge base. As far as our knowledge base knows, we don't have access to that full text article, even though in reality we do. So the bottom line here is that when publishers and content providers do not syndicate correct holdings data, and what I mean by correct is basically the title as it was identified, as it was presented when the article was published with the ISSN that was assigned when that journal title was published. When publishers and content providers do not syndicate correct holdings data to knowledge base providers, the end user isn't offered the appropriate fulfillment option. In that screen that we just looked at, every single one of those citations should have had a full text article link in it, and they didn't. And so what happens is, instead, the user starts sending requests to our resource sharing department to scan articles when we actually have it available online in full text. So, or putting that bottom line another way, if the user doesn't see a link, they think the library doesn't have it, and they will go to other sources, or they will use other less appropriate fulfillment options within our library services. So what can you do if you're working in a library with a discovery system? Because I know a number of you are librarians. So what can you do about this situation? Okay, well, first you have an immediate need. You have the need of the user to get the article. Instead of starting from the article citation, you can start at the journal homepage, either getting there through a discovery system or library catalog record, or if you have journal A to Z lists or whatever, to somehow get to that journal homepage and then drill down to the article. In the years before we had link resolution and before we had discovery services, this was the only way you could get to an article typically. If you didn't actually have the direct URL, was you had to start at the journal homepage and then drill your way down. So that'll get the user to the article that they need right then. But then to fix the problem, what do? Well, one of the things that you can do is you can add an entry in your knowledge base for that earlier title. So locally, I can edit that one record that you saw in there already, fix the date so that the date only corresponded to the later title, and then I can add 2 more entries in my knowledge base with the ISSN and with the dates corresponding to those titles. And then that will take care of the full text linking problems that are using open URL link resolution. Then the other step that you want to take is to contact the knowledge base provider and or the publisher or content provider to let them know that this is a problem. Some of the ways that I have found fairly effective to get their attention is to let them know the magnitude of the problem. Remember when in that earlier screenshot when I said I do a search on ISSN and oh look, there's 630 article citations here that aren't showing full text links when they should be. Well, tell the publisher that. Say, there are 630 article citations here which we are unable to provide full text access to the articles because you are not providing the correct ISSN and coverage data to Ex Libris. So that's one of the things that I found effective is if you quantify the problem, then it gets their attention a little better. Now, there are also ways that knowledge-based providers like Ex Libris, like EBSCO, like Serial Solutions can account for these kinds of situations. What Serial Solutions does is whenever they know that a particular provider like Ingenta is only sending current title, they'll write a rule in the processes that they use to ingest the Ingenta data into the knowledge base to basically say, okay, every time you get this title with this set of dates, break it apart into these 3 titles that represent the complete title history. So, and that generally works. It's a little brittle in the sense that if Ingenta changes, if there's another title change involved, then the rule won't match, and Serial Solutions would have to rewrite the rule. But at least in your knowledge base, all of the titles are represented. The approach that Ex Libris takes with SFX and to some degree with ALMA is, okay, well, if the problem is the fact that the ISSN aren't matching, then we're not going to like break the titles apart, but instead what we'll do is we'll take that current data that we get, that syndicated data we get from Ingenta, and then we'll add the earlier ISSN, so at least the link resolution matching will happen. And so you'll get a match between the citation and the knowledge base, and the article will present a full text link. The only problem with that works great in SFX. The problem with that within the ALMA environment is if your knowledge base is also controlling or is related to the link to the display of bibliographic records for journals in your catalog or in your discovery system, then if you don't have those earlier titles represented, then you will not see catalog records, MARC catalog records appearing in your discovery system. So that's one of the drawbacks to that approach. But from the aspect of just providing open URL full text access, that approach works fine as well. But you need to contact both the knowledge base provider and the publisher. So how does PyJ tie into this other than the fact that there's a recommendation for syndication? You know, the publishers and content providers should always syndicate data that corresponds to the title histories. Well, one of the things that we do, if you go to the NISO PyJ website, you'll see a link that says experiencing a PyJ related access or display problem, write to the publisher and provider. And what this is this is basically a link to a letter template that you can basically take this template, customize it to your problem, and we've provided, you know, everything that needs to be edited, you know, in square brackets and in red, so that you'll know not to leave those elements in. But basically, and what we're able to do in this letter is also refer back to the PyJ guidelines, so that if publishers have any questions, they'll be able to go to the guidelines themselves. And if you have any ideas, now that you know a little bit more about the fact that PyJ is a recommended practice and some of the areas that PyJ covers, I know that if you have any ideas about how the guideline can provide additional support for eJournal display, presentation and display, and to some degree linking as well, go ahead and you can send us a message through the NISO PyJ website as well, because we would be real curious to hear what your ideas are. So I provided, or Regina and I have provided just a couple links and articles here that provide more background information. And I want to thank you for hanging in there until the end. At this point, we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions. If you could submit your questions through the question box, then I think Shelley's going to go ahead and let us know what those questions are. So thank you.
All right. I have just a few little additional comments while people are getting their questions organized. So I also wanted to mention something to any publishers, that if you follow the recommendations to consider each change of title as a separate title and a separate ISSN, you will be able to claim more titles in any given database or package, because you'll be counting the way the libraries count. And if you have 2 or 3 different titles for every one that you thought you had, you can end up with 2 or 3 different, two times or 3 times more titles that you can advertise. The second thing I wanted to mention was to just give a shout out. I see that there are JSTOR people in the audience, at least John Kiplinger signed up, and I want to hold out JSTOR as a very, very good example of people who follow the sequence of ISSN and who give appropriate title histories and keep their content marching in line with ISSN and catalog records. So, good example.
Okay. Thank you, Regina and Steve. I hope more publishers get on board with PyJake, and this has been a very, at least for me, needed topic to have discussion about, because I have seen this at my library as well. We have a couple of questions, and I encourage all of y'all to submit additional questions and comments using the question box. Has there been, or what kind of buy-in have you gotten from publishers and aggregators?
Steve, do you want to talk about the SAGE example?
Oh, that's a good idea. Thank you. I was going to pass it off to you, but you're right. The SAGE example is a good example. So we were, after we had done some marketing and some presentations about PyJ at various conferences, we received a communication from, what's her name, Letty Conrad, is that it?
Letty Conrad.
Letty Conrad, from SAGE, that basically they were one of those, and SAGE had historically been a problem child with only syndicating current title information with the whole history of coverage. And apparently they had been talking about it for a while, knowing that it was a problem, and one of Letty's jobs was to basically undertake a project to research all of the title histories for all of the journals that they publish, get that information up on the SAGE websites for those journals, and also syndicate the correct data. And what they ended up doing was they ended up hiring Becky Culbertson, who is a serials cataloger maven extraordinaire at UC San Diego, to basically go through their entire inventory and do the title history research for them. So that's one option, is that if you're working for a publisher, if you do have some resources available, and if you consider this a high enough priority, you can actually contract with, you know, the people who are the experts in this metadata. And I think that it's especially important when you're a publisher, that when you purchase a title, you know, the whole transfer of titles, when you get titles transferred to you, you may actually not know that there's a title history associated with this, depending upon what the earlier publisher did. So one approach to take, if you don't have the staff or the resources or the expertise to be able to do any type of title history research, is to contract with someone like Becky Culbertson at UCSD, who has the resources. As a cataloger, she knows the resources to work with, and has access to them. So that's, and I think everything, I have not experienced any problem with SAGE titles for maybe the last 6 months to a year, and we used to have regular problems all the time with it.
And Steve, let me also mention another way to get title histories and good ISSN is from the ISSN International Center. Now, you could subscribe to the portal product and look them up, but they also offer what they call their premium service. And if a publisher, a company, an organization writes for a quote and gives them some idea of the number of titles that they're interested in, they will quote them a fee to do what Becky did, really give title histories and appropriate ISSN. So that's another source for reliable information.
Okay, another question is, Has the linking ISSN made an impact on keeping track of the histories? And has OCLC added these to most records in WorldCat?
Okay, very good question and very good opportunity for me to clarify what the linking ISSN actually links. And in retrospect, I think I regret that we chose the word linking ISSN because I think it gives the impression that it may tie together the earlier and later titles, and there is a great need to do this. Unfortunately, or just not yet, we may be working on the revision of the ISSN standard to have an ISSN for families, and that would be earlier, later related. But the linking ISSN only connects the print, the online, the CD, or other medium version under the same title. So I really can't answer that the linking ISSN has solved the problem of title histories. I think the linking ISSN has definitely helped in any open URL resolver situations where they might not be populated by both the print and the E, but maybe instead only have a place or a database that might only have one position for ISSN. The linking ISSN can really be used to link to content regardless of format. Now, as I said, the future will definitely be giving consideration to helping with this tying together of earlier and later titles through this potential family ISSN. I'm not going to call it ISSN F. I think also one of the challenges, and I made this analogy when I gave a report at the ELECT's Continuing Resources Committee, this last ALA annual. So when you talk about families, I think about wedding invitation when I had to draw up the list for my daughter's wedding. So with my big Italian family, who do you really consider family for the purposes of wedding invitations if you can't invite everybody? And I think the same thing goes for a serial family. How closely related, do we use the supplements and the offshoots, or do we just give that ISSN family to that straight line of descent, father and then child and child and child? Of course, serials aren't all that simple. Some of them split, some of them merge. So the question will be, what is encompassed by that ISSN? So to go back to your question, a linking ISSN does not tie earlier and later together.
Okay, the next question, are discovery service providers involved in these discussions? It seems they might be able to identify problems before our users get stuck by broken links.
Yeah, discovery service providers, I think most of the major ones are aware of the issues at this point, and have come up with their approaches to resolving the data when they get only the current title for a title history. And like I said, Serial Solutions and Ex Libris have come up with historically have come up with different approaches to how to handle the problem. In both of those approaches, the discovery service provider really they don't try to do any education of the publisher. They basically just deal with the data that the publisher sends them. And I don't know to what degree any of the major discovery service providers are trying to do any kind of education with publishers or with content providers, or if they even attempt to do that. So that might be an effort that might be better served by an education effort or a marketing effort from libraries. basically from their customers rather than from the discovery service providers.
Right, but Steve, I want to add that when the PyJ working group was formed, it was very diverse in terms of having representatives of publishers, of some services. We had Laurie Kaplan from ProQuest on the group. I can't remember how all the different organizations that were involved, but we were very clear that we did not want a group exclusively of librarians trying to preach to providers, vendors, publishers, that we tried to have a lot of different representation on working group. Even within the library community, we had both cataloging librarians and reference librarians. We might have even had somebody representing acquisitions. So that will also be important for the working group that revises the ISSN standard. It will definitely have to include publishers, vendors, representatives from other standards, be a very broad ISSN representative group of users and producers.
Right. I agree with that completely. I think that one of the things, I mean, in one of the slides I say, you know, one approach to take is to contact both the publisher or the content provider or the platform provider and your discovery service if you're troubleshooting and identify problems. Yeah, but I think librarians do need to be involved in that as well.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and did I correctly understand, Regina, that the standard recommends how publishers should name their journals? In other words, they shouldn't change the name without reason. Do major publishers recognize, the problems that title changes causes? Sorry.
This is another never-ending story, I think. We try. Certainly PyJ has this information. We have former information that came out to this effect about title changes some years ago, but from dealing with publishers over the years, I have come to realize that there are so many forces that act upon those title changes. In some cases, there is an editorial group that seems to have very much control, the editorial board. There might be an organization that is working to have their journal published by a commercial publisher, but the professional society has strong feelings about how its title should be read. In some cases, such as the proceedings of many conferences, there is a committee that changes every year, and you no sooner can communicate with one committee about what not to do, but the whole committee is different and they have a different idea about how to put the title of the proceedings. So it varies greatly, and I think anything that libraries and librarians can do to spread the word about careful consideration of changes of title is all to the good.
Okay. We are glad you could be with us today, and you will soon receive a short online evaluation form. Please take a few minutes to respond to the questions. Your comments are very valuable and help the ALETS CE Committee plan future events. Thanks to the ALETS Continuing Education Committee and the ALETS Office for Technical Support. The support they provide makes it possible for us to present these webinars smoothly. Also, thanks to the Continuing Resources Committee on Holdings Information for sponsoring this webinar. We have many events coming up. We have several additional webinars this fall on a variety of topics. As you can see, our next one is on the Library of Congress classification, and that is followed by one on the faceted application of subject terminology, or FAST. In October and November, we will have a 6-part webinar series on transitioning from MARC to BibFrame. We will end the fall session with webinars on budget transparency and research data management. We also offer web courses which are 4 to 6 weeks long and a 2-day email discussions. You'll find more information on the ALETS website. We hope you will participate in other ALETS for continuing education offerings again in the future. This concludes our sessions. Thank you for joining us.